Hello, and welcome to Imagine Your Story and Write It, a part of the Imagine Your Story Summer Reading Program theme. My name is Sarah Scoggin, and I'm the Early Childhood Librarian at Newburgh Free Library. A special welcome to all of you who are new to our summer reading program. Because this is about fairy tales and writing, we're going to start by talking about what stories are like, how stories work, and then we're going to talk about fairy tales specifically. If you haven't already done so and would like to, you can sign up for the ReadSquared digital platform, and that's available on a laptop or as an app. I'll put a link down in the description, and that will allow you to do, if you choose, what we call missions, so activities. I'll mention the mission in this video, and then you could log on, and if you do that activity, you get points. And when you get points, you can earn digital badges. And you also earn points towards completing the summer reading program as a whole. Or you can just write and enjoy for fun. So, got your imaginations warmed up? Let's get started. So, what is a story? You might be thinking, duh, everybody knows what a story is. But how would you explain it to someone who didn't know what a story is? What makes a story a story? I looked up a definition in a dictionary, and it said, a narrative designed to interest, amuse, or instruct the hearer or reader. That means a narrative, something that somebody tells. A story is something that is told, either on a page or by voice. And to make you interested, amuse, make you laugh, instruct, to make you think, to teach you something. It's what happens, who it happens to, and why. Stories are a part of all of our lives. So let's learn more about how we can make stories of our own. So let's say I have the story of the three billy goats Gruff. The three billy goats Gruff. Here's an example of how one artist, Stephen Carpenter, thought the three billy goats looked like. And they're underneath the bridge. You see there's a troll. So I'm not reading from that book. I'm just going to tell you the story of the three billy goats Gruff. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there were three billy goats Gruff. They lived in a meadow on one side of a river. The meadow on the other side of the river had grass that was much greener, tender, and delicious looking. But the bridge that went over the river was guarded by a mean troll. One day, the smallest billy goat came and started going over the bridge to get the grass. Trip, trop, trip, trop, trip, trop. The troll jumped up and said, "Who's that trip-tropping over my bridge?" "It is I, the smallest billy goat Gruff," said the goat. "But if you wait for my brother, he is much bigger than I am." So the troll thought and then said, "All right, you may cross. I'll wait for your brother." Then the medium-sized goat came and started to cross the bridge. Trip, drop, trip, drop, trip, drop. The troll jumped up. "Who's that trip-tropping over my bridge?" "It is I, the medium-sized billy goat Gruff," said the goat. "But you should wait for my brother. He is much bigger than I am." The troll thought and said, "Very well, you may go. I will wait for your brother." Finally, the biggest billy goat Gruff came. Trip, trop, trip, drop, trip, drop. The troll jumped up and said, "Who's that trip-tropping over my bridge?" "It is I, the biggest billy goat Gruff," said the goat. "And take that." And with that, he rammed his horns against the troll. He flew backwards into the water, and the current of the water swept him far away, and he never came back to that bridge again. And the three goats were able to eat the grass in the lovely meadow happily ever after. So that was our story, and a way I like to think about how stories work is by using a story sandwich. Here's my story sandwich. We've got bread on both sides, and we've got our fillings in the middle. So let's go through this. This is actually going to be your mission, is to create a story sandwich. You could use white paper if you don't have colored paper, or just draw the shapes of things in your sandwich. But this is something I actually did in 3rd grade, and I never forgot it. So here's our story sandwich. The first piece of bread is the conflict, the problem or the goal or the puzzle someone wants to figure out. So there can't be a story without a conflict or a goal. Because if everything's just perfect, you can describe a perfect day, but that wouldn't be a story. Every story has something that somebody is wanting or reaching for or trying to figure out, trying to do or hoping for. That is what makes a story. So in our Billy Goats Gruff, the conflict was that the Billy Goats wanted to cross the bridge and they were being stopped by the trolls. That was the conflict. The characters. Who does the story happen to? You need at least one character. Usually there are more than that for the story to happen to. So characters are so important. When you build really good characters, characters that people can see in their minds when they're reading, it makes the story seem much more real. The characters in our story were just the three Billy Goats and the troll. The plot. So what happens? First this happens, and this happens, and this happens, all connected together by trying to reach our goal or solve our problem. So the plot was how the first Billy Goat tried to cross, and then the second, and then the third, and then what happened to the troll at the end. That's the plot. On further thought, I probably shouldn't have used Swiss cheese as the cheese slice to be the plot because you don't want holes in your plot. All right, the setting is the tomato slice. So where did the story happen? When did the story happen? In our Billy Goats Gruff, it just happened once upon a time and far, far away. So the setting could be in my backyard yesterday, or in the year 27,000 on the planet Zip-Zop. Or it could just be in a Magic Kingdom. So where and when does the story happen? And finally, we have some extra things you could talk about. This is the lettuce. You could talk about style. So do you use fancy words, fancy long sentences, or is it more simple? Is it more plain? Sometimes you want fancy, sometimes you want plain. And point of view. Am I pretending to be the character? Do I say I tried to cross the bridge? Or I'm saying they tried to cross the bridge. So if I'm saying I tried to cross the bridge, we should call that first person point of view. If I say they, the Billy Goats Gruff tried to cross the bridge, we call that third person point of view. If I say you tried to cross the bridge, that would be second person. We don't usually write many stories like that. But you can. And last is tone, which means am I being funny or am I being serious? How does my story sound? And lastly, the resolution. So at the end, did we reach our goal? Did we solve our problem? What happened at the end? That's our resolution. So at the end, the troll was in the water and the three Billy Goats Gruff ate their grass happily ever after. So this is your mission. You can make a sub sandwich. So let's talk about fairy tale stories then. If we just talked about stories in general, fairy tales and folk tales and stories like that usually have been told for many, many years, passed down by one person telling and the next person remembering before they were written down. There are very many, many, many fairy tales from all over the world, not just the ones that you are maybe familiar with. I have a lot of fairy tales. There are lots of places you can read fairy tales online that I encourage you to check out. One of them is World of Tales, which I will link down in the description. Story Nori is another one. And Stories to Grow By. You can also check out Story Berries. There are just very many places where you can read fairy tales and maybe discover whole new kinds of fairy tales that you've never heard of before. So, what might we find in a fairy tale? What do we find in fairy tales? We might find magic. Almost certainly going to find magic of some kind, but not always. We might find, what else? People with powers. Like a wizard or a witch or a sorceress or a genie. We might find stories that happened once upon a time. We might find stories that happen in a castle, kingdom, or in the wilderness, like a forest. Maybe with a prince or a princess or a noble knight. We might find A poor man or woman who succeeds by being good and smart. That's one of my very favorite things about fairy tales. It's those characters who are good, that they are generous, they share their little bit of food, say they only have a little crust of bread, but they still share it, or they're honest. Those are the ones who are rewarded and win in the end. Or someone who is smart. They might use being clever to solve a problem or stop someone who is being bad instead of fighting against them. Strange creatures. We might find dragons or mermaids or fairies or water sprites, or we might find ordinary animals like bears or tigers that can talk. And we might find something that surprises us, especially if you read fairy tales from all different parts of the world and all different cultures, not just the one that you're the most familiar with. You might find a different kind of fairy tale. So let's create our own fairy tale, sort of multiple choice style. So I'll put on the screen all the different choices, and after each one, you can pause the video, look at your choices, and decide which of the different elements you're going to pick. So one for the setting, the conflict. Of course, you could always jump in and create your own, but if you want to follow with the multiple choice story, we'll see what story we end up with at the end. Okay, let's make a fairy tale multiple choice style. Should our character be a knight, the third son of a poor miller? That's the character in A Puss in Boots. We can have that character too. A clever princess, or a forest sprite, like a little fairy type character. What should be the conflict or problem or goal? A bad wizard turned the king to stone? The character has no food or home and seeks a fortune? An ogre is stealing things, or a magic sword is missing. Let's say our story happens once upon a time. But where should the story happen? A beautiful kingdom? The ocean? A dark forest? Or inside a volcano? What should the plot and resolution be? The character goes on a quest for a box that can have anything you want inside, like the cure for being stoned, or gold, or ogre be gone, or the missing sword they were looking for. Or the character meets a sorceress who will magically solve the problem if the character answers 3 riddles. Or the character goes in search of a magic lamp with a wish-granting genie that is guarded by a monster. Or the character saves someone's life, and that person turns out to be a good wizard who takes the character as a student and teaches him or her how to solve the problem. So thank you so much for watching. If you want, you can get started on your story sandwiches, or if you would like to stick around, I'm just going to read a portion of Pinkalicious Storytime by Victoria Kahn, published by HarperCollins Press. We were at a book fair waiting in line. I was going to meet my hero, Princess Plum. I have all of her books. Princess Plum is kind. She's smart. She grants magic wishes and wears a sparkly purple tiara. I love her stories. I hope she signs my book, I told Mommy. I couldn't believe I was going to meet a real princess at last. But when we got to the front of the line, I was very surprised. Instead of a princess, I saw a man. Is Princess Plum a man? I said. I'm Sid Silver, the man laughed. I'm the author of Princess Plum. That means I write books about her. But how can you write about being a magic princess if you aren't one? I asked. When you're an author, you can tell all sorts of stories, said Mr. Silver. Princess Plum is a character I made up. Stories can be about anyone or anything you want. Just use your imagination. So, I'm very glad I can make up stories about anything I can imagine, not just the things that I am in real life. So thank you again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye.